Back in 1988, a plane tragically fell from the sky over a small town in Scotland called Lockerbie. But what happened next wasn't just a criminal investigation. It became this extraordinary global showdown. This is the story of how that one event pitted the world's highest court against its most powerful political body, forcing a question that, honestly, we're still talking about today.
So it really all boils down to this one huge question. When you have a major legal dispute that crashes head-on with a decision on global security, who gets the final word? Is it the judges sitting in The Hague, or is it the diplomats meeting in New York? That's the heart of the conflict we're about to get into.
Okay, so how on earth did a criminal investigation spiral into this massive, high-stakes international standoff? Let's, rewind a bit and trace it back to the very beginning. So things started moving really fast. After the tragedy in '88, it took about 3 years for investigators to finally indict 2 Libyan intelligence officers. But here's the twist. Instead of extraditing them, Libya did something pretty unexpected. In early 1992, they went on the attack and sued the United States at the World Court. And just like that, a legal firestorm was igniting. And right away, boom, you have this major legal clash. Libya's side was pointing to an international treaty, the Montreal Convention, basically saying, hey, under this treaty, we have the right to try these guys ourselves. But the US and the UK completely rejected that. They were saying, nope, you have an absolute obligation to hand them over. There was just no middle ground here.
So with both sides totally dug in and at a complete impasse, the whole dispute just escalated. Suddenly, this legal case happening in The Hague was about to get steamrolled by a huge political power play in New York. This is basically round one. The Security Council steps into the ring.
All right, so here's how this whole power play went down. Libya was worried about potential military action, so they asked the World Court for essentially an emergency restraining order. But while the judges were still thinking it over, the US and UK took the fight to a different arena, the Security Council. The Council then declared that Libya's refusal was a threat to international peace and invoked its most powerful tool, Chapter 7 of the UN Charter. This is a big deal, because it allowed them to pass Resolution 748, which made the demand to surrender the suspects legally binding on every single UN member state.
So you can imagine the court, right? They're looking at this brand new, totally binding resolution, and, well, their hands were tied. Citing the UN Charter itself, the judges basically said that obligations under the Charter beat out any other treaty. In that one moment, the Security Council's political decision effectively just erased Libya's legal argument under the Montreal Convention.
And the vote? It was pretty decisive, 11-5 against Libya's request. At this point, it really looked like the Security Council had just landed a knockout blow. You'd think the case was dead in the water, but it wasn't.
So fast forward 6 years. 6! The sanctions are still on Libya. But that case at the World Court, it's been quietly ticking along in the background. And now, in 1998, the court is finally ready to rule on a huge question. Did it even have the right to hear the case in the first place? Get ready for round 2.
So the US comes in and tries to get the whole thing thrown out. Their logic was pretty simple, really. They argued, what's the point of this anymore? The Security Council has already decided, so this case is moot. Basically, it's irrelevant. Why should the court even bother ruling on something that's already been settled by a higher power?
But the court was not having it. They just systematically shot down every single one of the U.S. objections. No jurisdiction? Rejected. Inadmissible? Rejected. And on that really crucial point, that the case was now pointless, the court did something really clever. It basically said, that's an interesting argument, and we'll deal with it later during the main proceedings. It was a total masterclass in judicial strategy.
So, what was the court's secret weapon here? It all came down to timing. Seriously. The court ruled that its authority over the case was locked in the moment Libya first filed its lawsuit. And crucially, this happened before the Security Council passed its binding resolution. The message from the court was unmistakable. Once a case is in our hands, no political body can just snatch it away.
And the vote this time? It was a landslide, 13-2 in favor of keeping the case going. The court had just powerfully carved out its own space, declaring that even when faced with the immense power of the Security Council, a legal dispute, once it's properly before the court, has to be heard. Okay, so after all that back and forth, what are we left with? What's the real legacy of this amazing legal duel? Well, it fundamentally changed how we see the relationship between these two UN powerhouses. So at the very center of that 1992 decision was this principle, Article 103 of the UN Charter. Think of it like the ultimate trump card in international law. It creates a clear hierarchy.
When Security Council decisions for keeping the peace conflict with other treaties, the Charter wins. The court confirmed this. But, and this is a huge but, its 1998 decision added this critical little twist. Yeah, the Charter is supreme, but that doesn't just erase the court's right to hear a case.
And that brings us right back to where we started, to that big question. The Lockerbie case didn't give us a simple winner. Instead, what it showed us was this delicate and sometimes tense dance between two massive forces, the political demands of security on one hand and the principled process of the law on the other. The case itself is long over, but that core question, well, that's one we're still grappling with today. In a crisis, which one should lead? And can we really, truly have one without the other?